We're live. Welcome to the Talk With Kiet podcast, where we connect people, ideas, and capital to help make a difference in the world. The podcast interviews people with interesting life stories that's worth knowing, ideas worth sharing, and capital worth allocating. I'm your host, Kit Tran. Now, today I am extremely lucky to have Nicole Rogers with me. She is the founder and CEO of Drawdown Foods. Nicole and I will talk about her career, life as an expat. I was an expat. She's been an expat. Talk about her startup family while raising kids. Not only is she running a startup, her husband's also launched a startup. That's going to be a fun conversation of the startup household. We'll talk about our food ecosystem, regenerative farming, and like the future of flavor. And then most importantly, talk about Drawdown Foods and what they're looking to solve and how we can all help Nicole. Nicole, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Kit.
So, Nicole, where we usually start out in the podcast is really about the journey, right? So I do want to talk about your career in terms of how it got you to the point that you are now. Growing up, you say, hey, you know what? I'm going to be in the food space. I'm going to be in the space of like solving world hunger in a different way. Like how you got to where you are now.
So I come from a long line of perpetually dissatisfied humans. So I'm from a farming family in southwestern Ontario. And, my grandfather, my father, they both, I think, were constantly thinking of ways to do things differently. My dad in 95 bought the URL farms.com, which is like pretty bizarre URL. I don't think any farmers had the internet. So I think that just inspires you to be creative. And so I had stints where I worked for other people, but I think I knew I probably wasn't a good employee. And I think it's genetic. I think I came from a long line of people who were not destined to be employees. And that sometimes makes the best entrepreneur because there's no other option. I'm unfit to work for someone else.
That's right. And what took you from, you grew up in Canada, right?
Yeah, so I lived, I've been out of Canada since 2008 with a few stints in between. I lived in China and in Shanghai. And then my then just boyfriend, now husband, got a job offer with a large law firm in first London and then a bait and switch to Abu Dhabi. So we moved in 2008 and haven't been back since. And truly, I think I don't know how you go from being. You tell me. How do you go from being an expat to like going home? I don't know. Yeah, I don't think we're cut out anymore for North America. I think. Yeah, we're like a blend, and culturally, we like to say we're like mutts, like we picked up cultures all around, and our kids are truly third culture kids. They don't really belong anywhere. They like having a Canadian passport. It's a good passport, but other than that, it's weird. We're culturally, we're a mix.
That's right, and I guess like how do you balance that raising a kid in a foreign country and then trying to start a company, like how do you balance all of that?
So my first company I started in Dubai. It was similar to Drawdown in that it was involved in the food space, but effectively in the Gulf there was this gap between strategic sourcing of the ingredients that are needed to make foodstuffs and the really kind of growing and well-supported food manufacturing sector. So largely state-owned companies. And so I set up what started as an advisory company and then kind of moved into investment because I had people coming to us saying, hey, like if the UAE needs tomatoes, can we invest in, infrastructure along that supply chain to get the tomatoes to the UAE? And, things like that happen naturally. And honestly, I started the business because I was pregnant, weirdly, which is strange. But I looked at my husband, who at that point was, magic circle lawyer, which has a connotation of just insane hours. Like it's an hourly business. So you can work smart, but like you're limited because you've got to bill so many hours. And he was working really hard. And we were not fortunate in getting pregnant, and then finally did. So I thought, I need to be the master of my own destiny. Again, I'm a pretty terrible employee. So like I was working for the government of Canada at the time. So I basically pitched them to work for myself and help them kind of where I could on promotion and trade and agri-food agenda.
Yeah.
And it was great. And so, look, I kind of charted my own path, which I love to tell women to do that, because you will always make money. And I think the more you have on, the more you do, the more efficient you get. Like you don't, and yeah, so I don't know anything differently than working for myself and having kids, to be honest. I was like 3 months pregnant when I incorporated Agriprocity, and I was, traveling with a baby when he was 6 weeks old, because our whole MO was to bring in crops from elsewhere into the UAE. So yeah,
right.
it was a privilege, to be honest. I was really lucky. I had some really great early clients that thought it was worth supporting and would be flexible. I don't know, it all worked.
Yeah.
Raising kids, sorry, just to finish the thought,
Yeah.
raising kids abroad though is, I think you just also raise more independent kids. So I would say, like, even as a baby, my eldest was much more independent. He was used to going to other people. He was used to being around people. He just had a natural independence, which also you don't always get when you don't leave home.
And it's a great influence on them, right? Like they're
Totally.
seeing you being the entrepreneur mom, and even your husband launching a company. Like I'm sure they absorb a lot of that around you guys.
Yeah, and I think, like, so part of the reason why I moved to Kenya from the UAE was, or I guess part of my pitch, because I had multiple layers of pitch. There's the fundraising pitch, but then there's the household pitch, right?
That's
So
right.
my household pitch was really like, look, we're not going back to Canada. We kind of have established that. We'll probably end up somewhere a bit more developed than, say, the Gulf. I think we're probably going to head west for time zones. So why don't we just do one more kind of crazy thing? And for me, Kenya, it had some historical connectivity to me because I have some really great Kenyan friends growing up and was really lucky to have that context. But I also thought it's like a great legacy place for kids. So I thought, if I can make this business go, this is an impact business. It's a for-profit business, but there's an impact element to it. It's a disruption. Would my kids then have like a toehold in a really cool market where there is a lot of, future growth opportunity and capacity? And could I build them something that they're proud of from a family perspective, like a family foundation platform? But also, could I give them some kind of legacy where they feel a connection with nature and animals and things that, really make them unique humans? I like to think a lot about, the story you tell your frosh week, like when you get to university, like, who are you?
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I raise my kids. I don't know if that's the thing you should say or not, but it's like, what are they going to say about themselves, right?
That's
and
right.
I thought, I think living in Africa, and not just living in Africa, but just having a constant connection. So that's the premise on which Drawdown was started, is that this could turn into something that allowed other people to harness funds they want to make an impact with. That's kind of what I wanted to do, and I just couldn't find an outlet. And so yeah, it's in a way about the kids. That's how I sold my husband.
Yeah, well, that's a great sales pitch. So
it worked. I'm here.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Now, before we touch on John, because you and I talked, we had a great chat, I think a few months ago, when you first reached out to me about, look, in 1972, we were a world population of 3.8 billion people. And now we're about 7.8, 7.9 billion. And by 2050, we'll be at 9.5 billion, right? Like, how are we going to feed the world? And even like the way we grow our food, the way we distribute food, and the whole supply chain issue. Mm-hmm. Like, what's your take on that?
So first of all, Drawdown is kind of like, sometimes I feel like we're very two-sided in our image, I guess, the image we present. But I would say at the core, Drawdown it's about a capacity shift. So there's two capacity shifts. One is just meaningful food procurement and systems that are required to procure food in the Southern Hemisphere. And that's something that there are a few really well-established value chains, like a banana value chain is such a good one because it's obviously like entirely a Southern Hemisphere thing. But what happened in a chain like bananas is they were so heavily commoditized too early on. And, I would say it's a bad value chain, right? It's heavily centralized. It's all based on aggregation. It doesn't spread wealth. It's environmentally destructive. There's tons of really bad things. So Drawdown is really about just operating first and foremost as an example of what could be different. So could you take something that could be as prolific as a banana and make an example of something that is much more distributed. That's your word, Kit, not mine. Much more disaggregated and much more focused on the actual value of the production model, which is there first and foremost, and not transplanting something that's really Northern Hemisphere centered down here in Africa. And so that's hard, right? System change is really hard. I actually don't know that I ever would advise anyone to do a system change business, I'm being honest. I mean, you have to have certain recipe. You have to be a person who's like excelled in you can't be like a real startup person. You have to have like some real commercial experience that people will give you money on the basis of that. And you have to have like an insanely thick skin because like, you get beaten down. You have to be so creative and then you have to take risks, but you have to take a lot of negative feedback. And then likewise, the problem that I think, so like that's a systemic thing that we believe in and it's like our mission, but the problem we're solving for then is actually just for like venture-backed food companies. So it's super weird. It's a bit frenetic, right? Like, because our client is a food manufacturer, a food company who went to a big ingredient house and said, hey, I want like the most prolific onion powder in the world. And I want it to be, have impact. It has to be completely net zero. It has to be, sustainable. I want it to help farmers. I want it to be this. And, this just doesn't exist. So that's kind of like, we're set out to solve the problem of like the next big food company and we're spreading risk, with a lot of small buyers. But yeah, I'd say that's kind of Drawdown in a nutshell, but it's a pretty complicated business, as you know, because you've like seen a lot of our collaterals and stuff. It's not an easy concept.
No, it's not. And how you been finding the experience with the sales pitch? Like, do people get it? Like, is there enough people that care about, how our world needs to change?
Yeah, we were super lucky. So in the beginning, like we've had a really interesting BD progression, which has been really valuable to us. And it will be the most valuable thing we have as a company. So our commercial plan originally, like the go-to-market strategy, was to work with an existingly large ingredient company and become like an impact arm within the ingredient company. So basically we would be the manufacturer. We would make ingredient products and we would allow somebody who knows what they're doing to formulate, distribute, and basically deal with the brand. Because we felt we wouldn't know how to do that. And the coolest thing about being nimble, the coolest thing about having a great team, which we have an amazing team, is that you can quickly pivot. And so basically what our biggest challenge is getting that intermediary to buy into our value prop. We realized that their customers bought into the value prop, but they were acting like this block. And that was super scary. And to be honest, like even our investors now, most of them ask us about this original intermediary that we first kind of were, I would say embedded in as like our strategy was that we were going to use them for all go to market and all, I guess like customer interfacing, the actual person that was going to put the ingredient in their product. And we made a really risky move about 4 months ago and said, what if we just call their client? Like,
why don't we try that? We'll give that a shot.
Like,
let's see what that goes.
Which sounds now so silly, but the connotation of that is that then we're saying we're a formulator, which means we're not just a manufacturer of onion powder with a great story. It means we're actually going to tell a food company that we can make their product taste better. And that is like a very different undertaking. And so, look, from a BD perspective, it was really hard to get the first guy on board, and it was because we didn't know what we were doing. My co-founder, who's our culinary head, she was just learning on the job. She was like, okay, culinary team on that side, like we're the culinary team, like what does that mean? Like we're like, her and some fairly unskilled labor who chop onions, what we learned was that people who have, huge teams and systems and whatever, they can never have that hustle and that authenticity that actually reads really well to our actual buyer. So like cutting them out just gave us such a good runway. And they're patient with us, our buyers. Like we screw up all the time. They give us like very unrealistic price expectations because they're also learning, and we're not offended. We're like, okay, that's probably impossible, but let's be transparent. And it's honestly created this pretty cool runway for us of, I think we're going to be the company that people want to come to first to make their product taste good. And I think we'll be more cost competitive. And I think we'll be able to certify certain environmental aspects just simply because of the nature of the way we process, the way we aggregate, the way we make the manufactured components of our ingredient lines. And yeah, it was such a risk that I can never imagine now that we didn't take it. But it was not the path that I was advised to take.
That's right.
Yeah, at all.
And actually, to backtrack a little bit, because you mentioned you managed to put together an amazing team. You have co-founders. Like how what's your process of, how do you find the team? And what are some of the ingredients of really building that good team dynamic?
I think I'm a late bloomer with team, is the honest truth. I don't think I'm good at it. My co-founders are huge technical experts who had a passion for pulling together a commercial person who could let them do what they want to do all day long. And that is awesome. That makes for a really good co-founding team. But that is just the stuff of luck and magic. Like that isn't something I am responsible for. It's just having a really cool network and meeting two, absolutely kick-ass women who are now my co-founders, and basically just saying, hey, I'm going to go try to build a value proposition that makes money on the back of what you two are really good at. So I can't take any credit. That's just, what I think makes for good team building, for me anyway, has been being really honest with my deficiencies, which is hard when you don't have money and you're a startup. And so basically going out and getting, first of all, a few investors that knew me in my past life as an investor also, and said, look, I will sweat in some stuff here, which is way more valuable than the money, but also insisting they gave money because that's important for my co-founders. But, that was the first kind of iteration of team for us was, and some of them, Kit, like,
that's right.
And like just saying, we can't afford branding people, but we really need to be, even though we're B2B, we have to have a brand. We have to have a strategy here. We have to be sexy because otherwise we're just like an emerging market ingredient house. What does that even mean? Like ingredient houses aren't sexy anyway, let alone when you put them in a hard market. So that was kind of our first iteration. And I'd say in the last maybe 2 months, myself as an operator, never having operated a business like this before, I'm getting a bit more savvy at having people in the room who just get things done. Like I think that's our team now. So it's great. Like people who don't care, people who, we had a shipment arrive on a truck without a ramp and the piece of equipment was 450 kgs. And the guy looked at us and said, well, where's your forklift? And we're like, distributed systems, man. Like there's no forklift. Like where's your forklift? I was like, even if you have a forklift, how do you get how do you get it off the truck without a ramp to like drive the forklift up? It was insane.
That's right.
So, just having we have now 2 or 3 people that will go out to that site and deal with that. Yeah. And I think that's like the coolest thing about a team in an emerging market, and the benefit of building a team in an emerging market, you get like this amazing scrappiness. But I wouldn't say I'm good at it. It's just you like people. And the only other thing I'd say about team that I do, and it's because I think I'm a woman, I often think about, I want like 90% of the team to be people who I'd leave my kids with. Because then those are people that are like, they get stuff done. It's like,
That's right.
they could like feed the kid. They could, take the kid to the hospital if something happened, all those things. And I'd say those are like my only two tidbits on team. Otherwise, honestly, Kit, I don't think I'm a terrific team builder. Other than I can create FOMO and make people excited to join, but I'm not strategic. I'm working at it. I wanted to get better.
Yeah.
So
Well, you've done a pretty good job though. So
well, let's see.
now, so actually going back, and you raised this point, right? Because I was introduced to you by Mark, one of your investors as well, and so how important is picking your first few investor? Like, is it more money, or is it really the people you're taking the money from?
Yeah, and so Mark is a really good friend of my dear friend who was our first advisor. And basically when Drawdown was just an idea, he was introduced to me via my network because he was part of the team that had built out Cargill Ventures. And it looked like an ingredient play. So it seemed like somebody like Cargill would have an interest. And what I think is the most important is that ecosystem. So my introduction really knew me well and knew what I was all about. And he then passed that knowledge on to Mark. And then Mark became an ambassador and passed it on to you. And I think that is what founders don't always spend time doing. And it is so valuable. It should be like the most important thing in your runway is having this collection of people who could actually explain your business, like sell you as well, better than you could sell. Mark can sell me better than I can sell myself. And that was, it's so impactful because I hope I'll be able to use him to sell me in the future. And he would, right? Because that's the kind of investor he is. It's so important. It's the most important thing. And we turned investors away and we were pretty focused. Like, I don't think we had many investors that weren't on board basically after a first hour. And it was because there was so much networking that had happened. There was so many frame of references. There was like a shared value system, to be honest, not to sound a little too, altruistic, but another one of our investors is a really cool Saudi-based farmer who really believes in farming and distributive systems and the need for food security because, he's at the front line of it. He lives in an arid country and is trying to produce food. That I think, and it creates a dynamic that the investors kind of also respect and like each other, which is quite interesting, which I hope we can curate a lot more and keep everyone engaged out of this angel group. I think then you lose that as you get more institutional investors, but for now, it's super important. It's the most important. It's our most important asset, to be honest.
Yeah, no, and that's how Mark and I connected because we care about. I know I keep using the buzzword distributed, right? Distributed farming, how we grow our food in the future. Distributed energy, right? We'll have a guest coming in a few weeks talk about decentralized power grids. And he's actually helping build decentralized solar power grids that you can actually power your own community without, depending on others. Like, I do think the world needs to think about
totally,
how this planet is going to look like and how we preserve it for our future generations. Right, that's going to be so important. And I think do good. Don't get me wrong. Make money is also very nice, but do good is more important.
Well, and I think, like, again, going back to our BD plan, the new thinking we have now is that we can steal the customers from the mainstream players. And so food is like centralized in multiple ways. Like in our space, food ingredients, the centralization is both at the creation of like these really core ingredients. So say like onion, garlic powder, things like that. There's really, massive farms that create the value chain. And it's hard to distribute that unless you go to another market. You can't go to China and create distributed processed garlic chains. That's just probably impossible. And so the next kind of, roadblock I see that Mark, I know, also really feels passionately about is just there's been so much consolidation in food ingredients. So there are not very many players. They are very old, established businesses. Like we're talking, there aren't many that are under 100 years old. They're acquiring everything very fast on the tech side. And so there's this gap. There's no innovation in, you know, the processes between like a field and like the
Yeah.
soil and the
Yeah.
water and the sun and something coming out of that field and taking it and putting it in a format that then can go to another company. So we don't want to disrupt farming, but you have to disrupt that value chain from the farm gate. And then you have to disrupt, now we know, the distribution of that, because, you know, if you just take our beautiful disruption and give it into like, I don't know, like a massive big player like Givaudan or like ADM or someone,
Yeah.
they're just not going to steward it along the way it needs to be to really make the impact. So you need an investor like Mark that understands that, because Mark was like, oh, are you sure? Like, you got a really good, you know, one of the big US firms, they're backing you. Let's get some money from them, you know, like, and then all of a sudden it was like, yeah, but then what? Like, how do we innovate in 4 years? You
That's
need
right.
good ecosystem to back that, right?
That's right. And you got to be a committed long-term investor as well, because it's a very long journey to get there.
Totally. Yeah. So that's, I think, the spirit with which we have all of our investors on board, and most of them are really open to comms. Like all of our investors, I, you know, WhatsApp with regularly. They share articles and ideas without bias, not saying that this is a direction you should take things, but just, I've read this, is it interesting? Most available for calls. Like I can't think of one investor that won't speak to me same week. Yeah, it's great. It's I feel very humbled. I don't take it for granted, I would say. It's not the norm.
Yeah. No, totally.
Yeah.
And just to backtrack a little bit, because last time when we talked, you mentioned like the percentage of crop yield that's gone to waste. Like that just impacts me mentally. Like you want to tell the audience like the whole, like from the crop to the like system, like how much of that goes to waste and why it goes to waste. Like because that's so important. Like until I
Totally.
heard that from you, I wasn't even aware.
Yeah. So a lot of people ask us why Kenya. We had someone not invest in us this last round because they couldn't rectify that I wasn't Kenyan and that I was working a Kenyan business, which I found really, that was like cool learning, right? Like so
Yeah.
many questions about how I knew anything because I wasn't from Kenya. I'd only lived here 2 years and had a bit more experience ahead of that, but not enough probably. They were right.
Yeah.
But I think, like to your point, food waste is this established global problem. And so, yeah, the numbers in Kenya, what I realized was there are some really good problem solvers in the US. There are some really good problem solvers in Europe. There are some great businesses that are taking food waste all the way to a juice product or, you know, B2C, which is awesome. Kenya is this crazy market that nobody knew. And I was able to identify it because I had a Gulf value chain perspective, in that it is a fresh horticulture hub designed entirely to deliver produce more cheaply to Gulf countries and the UK and Europe. And it's fascinating. Like it was designed this way, essentially. So think of like a Tesco or a Waitrose or a Carrefour, basically saying, I want, I want a, 99 pence cello wrapped bag of broccolini or carrots or whatever. And I think Kenya can produce it for me more cheaply. That's actually the business case for fresh exports. Everything is air shipped. And there are some major players here. The volumes are not like China, but say if China has 600,000 ton of fresh produce produced every year, Kenya does about 60. So it's like, not bad for a small country.
Yeah.
So in some of these crops, like when we were doing our research, to your point, we're talking like if like a broccoli field is contracted for Tesco, I always pick on Tesco because they're like kind of a middle range retailer, price wise. They're not an Asda, but they're not Waitrose for, I don't know how many European listeners you get versus Americans, but I guess like it's like Walmart to Whole Foods.
That's
And
right.
so they're in the middle. And they, if they're contracting 100 grams of tender stem broccoli, basically the farmer is going to plant 180 kilos worth. And that 80 kilos is just the hedge. So it is like designed to be waste, which like blew my mind. So that's like what I think Kenya offered us as a business, was that kind of waste. And, you know, there's only so much animal feed. This is actually a pretty I don't know, like some people argue Kenya, there is a lot of protein consumption. Some people argue it's low, but there is an established animal value chain here. So a lot of it goes to animal feed. So I would say that's good circularity, but a lot of it just goes into compost. And there's not enough compost in the world that, can be made from that kind of waste. So yeah, so it's I would say those are the really interesting numbers. And so we actually started with broccoli as a chain because my very fancy chef co-founder said, that's an interesting flavor. I bet you it's in a lot of things. I bet you it'd be in more stuff if it was cheaper. And it's not a value chain that you can access very often in a waste perspective. So that was kind of like our big aha waste moment, was definitely the broccoli value chain. That's probably what you most remember about the business, because the numbers, you're like, that can't be. Like, why would a farmer do that?
That's right. That's insane.
Doesn't make sense, but they do. And I'll have many farmers can come on this podcast and they'll corroborate my story. Certain value chains have more than less. Like our herb farm partner does as much as 50 ton a month waste in one line of herb.
Holy cow.
Mm-hmm.
That's insane.
Like, we can't even process that much, like maybe one day. But.
Yeah, exactly. By the way, broccoli is one of my favorite vegetables. So good choice. Yeah, good choice.
It tastes really good dried. Like, it actually is a beautiful dehydrated product, and it's incredibly healthy. Like, it really keeps its integrity when you dehydrate it. So we just have to figure out more things to do with it.
And it has high protein content as well, from what I learned, right?
It does. It has really interesting macro and micronutrient profile. It's just not used that much, but what we've been blending it into are, like, it's not often in like a greens mix, like a greens, like athletic greens mix. It's often disregarded, just simply it's an access point. So it's like, our job is to educate, our job is to formulate, our job is to get that ingredient, because it has got such a commercial proposition for us as a company. We need to just get it into value chains. That's kind of the crux of Drawdown and what we're doing.
No, that's right. And actually, so on the topic of, so much about nutrition, like, and as a startup founder, there's a lot of stress, right? Like, how do you maintain your health? Like, what are some of the secrets of, like?
Question. So I'm a very bad sleeper. My husband and I are both bad sleepers. So we now have a new goal of, like, the only way I sleep well is I have to do very, very hard workouts. So I can't go for a walk. I can't, like, there's certain people that can just, like, get fresh air, do fitness in a more holistic way. I have to work out, like, very hard, like, leave everything on the floor workout. So whether that's like a spin class or bar class or something, it has to be like extreme fitness for me to sleep well. So that's probably like the most important thing that's a part of my regime. And so, like, on a week like this week, I've only worked out once, because we had we had like a few crises things happen, not in the big scheme, not crises, but things that I missed that slot because I had to physically be somewhere else. And that's really bad for me. If you ask people around me, I get pretty punchy. And I also do, I also fast. We both fast. So my husband does intermittent. Maybe it's a hang up of my days in the UAE. I do like a full blown fast 1 day a week. So it's like almost a 24-hour fast. And it just works for me. It's really good clarity. I like it a lot. And then the last thing I would say is, like, taking breaks. We're pretty lucky because we can flex with, like, our personal lives and work lives. And so I just find that really works for my mental health, to be in and out of things. So, like, I often will go grocery shopping at 2 p.m. in the afternoon, because my ADD becomes so extreme thinking about the groceries that I need for something, like say I'm hosting something on the weekend, that I just have to do it. And that's like, my team knows, like, and not lying. Like I say, I'm going
Yeah,
grocery shopping, and they
that's
know it's
right.
not actually about the groceries. It's about that my mind has become fixated on the groceries. So I just have to go get the groceries.
That's right.
Because
That's right.
otherwise productivity drop.
But by the way, I swear by I also do intermittent fasting. I do the 16/8 like your husband, and
Yeah,
it's been amazing, right? I've done it for the
yeah,
last few years. Um, Actually, now that you raised it, I also
good.
have ADHD. So
Okay.
it's actually a benefit as a entrepreneur to have ADHD, is it not?
I totally think so. I think so. Yeah, it's very annoying for your team.
That's why. That's why.
100%. It's very annoying for my co-founders because I think in concentric circles, and they're like, wait a second, wait a second, wait a second. Oh, we're in this circle over here. And like, there's no connection between the circles, which can drive them crazy. But I think people that have attention deficit, or that you're often a creative person. And so as long as you can find an outlet to systems, then you can usually make it into a productive, but not always. Like it can be I have to keep it in check. I'm sure you do too. I
Yeah,
can be
totally.
very annoying. Yeah, I can be
Yeah,
very annoying. I
yeah.
can be a bad listener. I can be, I don't often like the finish of things. I like the start of things, the finish. So again, team building. Now I have a really good team of finishers.
That's
Key.
right. That's right. And it's really about knowing your balance, right? Knowing what you're strong at, what you're weak at, and having a team to really help fill those gaps, right? That's the important mindset.
I think the thing that I strive for is, if you asked someone on my team, I don't think people have, I actually don't need to be liked. And that is something I grew into getting older. I had a huge need to be liked when I was younger. And now I've really grown into my polarization. And sometimes I can lay it on too thickly because I'm trying to be disliked, which I see is like actually a skill now, very weirdly. And very few women do this. So it is a very fine line to walk as a woman, because men do this quite often, but women often are perceived as just being bitchy or being difficult or
Yeah.
emotional and things like that. But I actually curate it. It's something I think about logically, and my team knows it. And they don't like it. They find it annoying. They're like, can't you just stop and just be amicable for like 1 second, and like, don't play this person right now? And they will say, you're just being contrarian. Don't be contrarian, or you're annoying. But then the other thing, which I like, when they recognize it and they're like, okay, because I'm like, yeah, so they're like, pivot, like, let's do something more interesting. Like,
That's
this
right.
is not interesting. Like, do better.
That's right.
And I don't apologize. I'm very, very, very tough by design. And then the secondary thing that I hope people say about me is that I'm really self-aware. And I like work on those two things so much, like my fear of being disliked and self-awareness, which maybe work together a bit. But I think most of my team would say I have a really thick skin. I can take any criticism, like, give it to me. I like it. I like it straight up. I like it, whenever you want to give it, I'm okay. Like, it doesn't have to be in a specific space format. I like it. I would like to create more of a culture of that. I don't think that works.
That's right.
It's my dream, maybe one day. I think you have to be either really, really rich, so everybody's lying to you anyway, or I think, yeah, I don't know. You have to have like something intrinsic. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe like one day I'll have that team that allows for that space. Or you have to have everyone on drugs or like medicated, or I don't
That's
know.
right.
But and then, yeah, the self-awareness thing, I think just, you have to be so open to criticism. You have to just welcome it. You have to make a space, at least for yourself. You don't necessarily have to, people don't have to accept the terms that you have accepted, but it's, I find it just really liberating as having a startup. And, I like it. I don't, maybe that's a weird thing, but I really thrive on that constant state of self-awareness.
Yeah, and the reality is, you're not everyone's cup of tea, right? Like I heard this stat and it was mind-boggling, where the most well-liked U.S. president only had a 60% approval rating or something like that, which means still 40% of people don't like that person, even though that person's so great. Because you're just not everyone's cup of tea. And you know what? If you wake up every day worrying about like not being anyone's cup of tea, like, come on, move on.
You never
Like,
do
life
anything.
goes on. That's
Totally.
right. That's right.
Yeah. And I think it cripples founders because you're trying to play to your investor, you're trying to play to your staff, you're trying to play to your market and partners and everything. And we're a heavily partnership built business. And I think if I was going to think of one of our partners, he would say he's actually given me the criticism of saying, you're trying to make that guy like you. I already like you. I don't stop it. Like, can we just do what works for you? And then let me know. Let me see how it works for you. And then if it works for us, then it goes. And it was like great partnership. And this is like basically one of our suppliers. And I think giving the space and working on partnership relationships that you have that kind of intimacy, because that is intimacy.
That's right.
That, you know, he was like, you do you, do it really well. It's going to work. I have faith. I understand the model. You know, we've got this far, you know, we're in it together, but you do you, and then let me see you like the way you want to be. And then I will, you know, kind of like hitch my wagon up, and then we'll be way better off. But if you're trying to please me before you figured out what's going to work for your side, we're never going to be good partners. And it was great advice. And I think it'll be like my most important advice of 2022 was like that. As a startup founder, you have to do you sometimes, you know, like you have to just, and you know what, then when if you doesn't work, then I have to be prepared to go back to that partner and say, yeah, I just wasted a lot of your guys' time. Like, I have to change my mind because what I thought was going to work isn't going to work. And be humble and admit when you're wrong, you know, and then do it again, and risk losing the partner. They might say, cool, no thanks, you know, that was your one shot. But if you do them and not you, then you're really screwed because it'll be really tough for you to do you later if you've just pleased them for, you know, 6 months, and then you burn a bridge. Then they're like, ooh, you're not only do you not know what you're doing, but you're unethical and you don't have integrity and all that stuff, which is worse.
Yeah. But what you're saying is important, right? It's important to be authentic to really earn that honesty and trust. That's how you build over time. And you know, no one can do you better than you do you. Right. This is the reality of it.
Totally.
And
but a self-reflective view. So like yeah, like you can't just go into a format and say, okay, well, I'm like super likable. So like people like hanging around me, so they should want to do business with me, right? Like,
that's right.
I think that isn't gonna work. But if you say, look, I have a really creative brain, and so the way I look at Kenya is virtually any partner that partners with us is really lucky, because this super creative brain then gives them the ideas that helps them create new revenue streams in otherwise pretty stale businesses that are without a lot of, you know, pivot room. And basically the market with which we partner here is super competitive, super dog eat dog. Contracts shift, you know, every quarter. It's about, you know, 2 cents savings. That's hard business, right?
Yeah,
so
totally.
Knowing that you represent even just the creativity and just leveraging that was a really important part of our journey as a company here. And it's just, yeah, harnessing it and then staying true to that and apologizing when you had an idea that was stupid and didn't work, you know, saying, sorry guys, like that wasn't.
Yeah, that's
but
right.
It keeps our partners really engaged. Like they're always willing to pivot with us. Generally speaking, they're willing to go in a holding pattern. Like a few of our partners have been in a holding pattern for 10 months, you know, because we know the opportunity is good, but we're like, we got to do this thing first. And then when we do this thing, you know, we'll do this thing. And then that thing took 4 months longer than it was supposed to, of course, because it always does. But yeah, I think that's the strategic mind of a founder. If you can do that, I think you'll have success. If you can, you know, balance those relationships, because the whole world is relationships. That's all it
exactly
is.
it. Exactly it.
Give and take. And
Give and
like I
take.
said to you before, I started a business because I like people. And I just wanted to find a way to be around different, interesting people and seek out interesting people. And so this business is like my oyster, because if we want to do precision fermentation, it's like I'm perfectly suited to try and dig into that and find who are the experts in precision fermentation, who will fund precision fermentation, who will like that avenue of the business. And for me, the joy in my life, what crosses pleasure and business, is the joy of the pursuit of those interesting people. Like, who's going to make us smarter? Who am I going to like in fermentation? Who's
That's
going to
right.
be my fermentation friend?
That's
It's
right.
like I totally thrive on that.
That's right. Now, before we end this, because it's been an amazing conversation, how can the audience help you out, help Drawdown out? Like, what are the type of people you want to connect with, and what are some of the things that can help Drawdown from the
Hmm.
audience?
So we're really interested in building relationships now with partners who could help us get to next level of formulation. So we've just taken on a new hire who we're really excited about, who's kind of grown up in alternative protein space with some of the big kind of crazy, massive global brands behind him. And the thinking is combining funding with formulation. So if anybody, has a really good product, a food product, and feels really passionately about making it taste really good, and but keeping an impact and educating their consumer about the impact, we just want to know them. And I think for our first BD stanza, we're going to rely heavily on word of mouth, and we're going to have a good head start with our new, head of strategy. But I think, yeah, like everything that I try to do to tell our message is that, like, if you're a food company and you have a formulation team, or you're the marketing team, like, it could be anybody, just learn about us. And like, if you could just give us, a few hours of your time so we could learn about your flavor component, and then also your CSR and who you want to be as a company, and how you're being responsible to your consumer base, then we want to be your friend. And we don't necessarily need to sell you something, but we need these people in our ecosystem. We need to be learning so much more, because it's really new, uncharted territory. And but it's got to be the big behemoths, honestly, that kind of
Yeah,
come forward first. Like, we need not to call them out, but we need like the Impossible Foods of this world to believe that they're going to make impact with every component of their recipe, and do the contrarian choice, make the difference in what they buy to put in the product. Because the consumer, if educated, we're finding resoundingly with most consumer research polls, the consumer is super thoughtful in their spend, especially an American consumer.
that's right.
It,
That's
it's
right.
it's not hearsay anymore. It's a real thing. So yeah, so anybody who's listening, we just want to meet more and more food companies that have the will, because we don't necessarily either one of us know the way, but we have found in our BD, when a buyer and us as the seller have the will, we make really cool stuff happen.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Nicole, for being on today. And for those that are still listening, thank you for your continued support. And it's been a great conversation. And as I mentioned last time, this is a channel to help us to share and learn from each other. The startup journey, the journey of connecting people, ideas, and capital to make a difference in the world, it's a big journey, right? And so we need more people to participate and really help each other through the journey. Next week's going to be exciting. I will be talking with Kat Talochenko around our career journey, right, especially around fintech. And it'd be a very exciting conversation about the choices we make and how we get to where we get to. I think that story is also important because it's really about the pivot points we make in life.
Mm.
And so, stay tuned to next week. And again, thank you, Nicole, for being on today.
No problem.
Have a
Thank
good day,
you. So
everybody.
nice to
Thank
see
you.
you. Take
Bye-bye.
care. Bye.